Alright, so now we're going to look at where the industry is at now. It's very important to know the things in the past. It's very important to know how to use a texture and take the texture and make it into a displacement map. That's still very useful. It's very important to know how to generate displacements in Maya. That's really useful. But now I want to show you kind of what we do now, and this is sculpting. So this is not a Mudbox class. In fact, this is meant for a very 101 type of class in a college, and it is very oriented towards raster type of texture making. Okay, so this is something huge introduced at a college class very early on to show students where they need to start aiming at. Alright, so that means I'm just going to take a few seconds to do this, and it's all about the science behind it. Alright, so here we go. I got this. I'm just going to make a polyplane, and I'm going to take that to 150 for the scale, and freeze transformations to set it back. Now, what we looked at is this Approximation Editor, and we created that and edited it, and in here we could state how many subdivisions are there. Okay, and as we went up in subdivisions, you saw how slow it really got, and then it added more detail in those areas based upon the displacement map. Okay, so here's what it really is doing. Send to Mudbox, send as new scene. So it's taking this polyplane and subdividing it, but I'm going to subdivide it in a little bit different fashion. I'm going to take smooth positions off, and what happens then, it doesn't crinkle around the outside edges. So display wireframe. So right now that's set to 2 as far as back in Maya is concerned. So that's 400 polys. Shift D will allow you to subdivide this. We set it to level 6 once. That's 496,000 polys. And as we go up, we now have 1,000,000. Remember level 8, how slow it was? Well, that's almost 3 million polys being subdivided in Maya, and that's why it's so slow back in Maya. So that's what it's doing. It's subdividing this. And I'm going to take wireframe off, and we're going to just take a couple seconds to make something. Trust me when I say it's going to be something really quick. Alright, so I'm just going to put a big blob right here in the center. Then I'm just going to take probably something like scrape, just scrape this back a little bit, just to give it some angles. And you can see how that geometry is being pushed and pulled very quickly because it's a sculpting program, and this is kind of like what we do now. We sculpt on things. This is almost like, I want to say, 80% of the industry of modeling now is sculpting. But we use everything to our advantage, anything and everything. So maybe that's just a made-up statistic, but it's very important to know sculpting. You'll learn it once you get to a certain point. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is just add some detail to this, and then I'm going to add some weird detail, and I just want enough detail to get my point across. So I'll make some like weird stuff. So this is about the first day of Mudbox class, really. You know, you're seeing what usually happens. Students learn that they can sculpt on things and they start going to town on something. Okay, and then make some little tiny details just for entertainment's sake. And then make my point. Because you can quickly get into the point where you'll get totally sucked into this world forever and play around with it. It's very fun. Okay, cool. So I got some highs, I got some lows, I got some detail. And what I want to do is page down. And you can see that there's a change in geometry. It goes all the way from there to here. So 7 being the highest, and then 0 being the lowest. Okay. Now what I want to do is create a displacement map based on 0 and 7. And I do that by going into extract maps. Displacement map. There's 0, there's 7, and I want to do it based upon subdivision. I'm just going to choose a 1024 map. Please note that the detail won't be as perfect here, but it'll be fast. The texture, and then take this and export it out to a 16-bit integer RGBA. So this will allow Mudbox to communicate with Maya to make some of those connections. Alright, so I'll extract that. Now remember how long it took to generate the normal or the displacement back in Maya, right? This was already done. Easy as that. So what it did is now it went on Paint and then added a new bump map here. So you're seeing some kind of anomalies every once in a while based upon that bump map. The bump map really is unneeded. I don't really want it, but I'm just going to keep it there, and I'm going to send this back to Maya. Now, here's where you don't want to ever hit this button, and this one's too low. So what version of this is going to be my lowest? And we need something that the change happens. So here's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay? So there's 5 levels. Okay. So I'm going to send level 2. And I'll send it to Maya. Send as new scene. This time I'll say send meshes at current level, which is level 2. And here we go. 6 on the keyboard will give me this. And I also like to take normals and soften edge at this point. Alright, now it also brought in my displacement map. But if you had no understanding of any of the stuff that I showed in the past videos, you would never be able to get it to render correctly. So here's my displacement map, and I can edit this texture if I wanted to and kind of show it to you. See, it doesn't really look like much here in Photoshop. So let me drag this over here. Doesn't look like much, right? So what I'm going to do is map this out, and you can see here's bump and here's reflection. But I don't see any displacement map coming in. I see a displacement node, but I don't see any mapping coming in. So that tells me that there's something that went awry here. Here it is. See how it says level 2? So this one should be at all. And you can go to object list. There we go. So click on it, and I want that to be 7. This one I want it to be 2. There we go. That's so much better. Again, subdivision. And again, 16-bit. And again, send to Maya, send to new scene. So now I have this, which is correct. And if you see my material, I got Lambert 2. I can map that out, and it has the bump map. And it doesn't have anything about displacement. So knowing the past really helps. I can have my Lambert, and that Lambert can have a texture, middle mouse button, click and drag it over to Displacement Map. And then that can be set to an alpha range of 2, -1. This is about the standard when it comes to alpha gain is 2, -1. Especially for Maya and its point of gray. So just kind of keep that in mind. That's how I got those numbers. Anytime you're coming into Photoshop and not knowing, then you have to do some math. Now that's not to say that you can't dink around with these and then make them bigger, because you do get some really cool results that way. Okay, so click on your mesh, and then let's go into rendering editors, Approximation Editor. Let's create that. Remember what I said? I said there was 5 levels of subdivision. So 5, between 2 and 7. So let's set that back to 5. Also, in the rendering editors, we'll use Mental Ray. 6 on the keyboard to display this as shaded. And let's render that out. So there we go. We have everything we needed from a high level to, or a low level to a high level. And there it is in Maya. Now you can see what happened in areas that were just too high. It went in this area and then it caused some havoc. But here it really is nice. Here, not so nice. And the cause of this is because your base mesh didn't match your highest. So back in Mudbox, you would have to do something called retopologization to the mesh in order to have a high and a low. We can also see this because look at the polygon structure at this. It's very uniformed in this area, but then very schizophrenic and huge in this area. Again, because of that, it's dividing even over here, and it's not getting enough resolution in this area. So those are things that you're going to be learning in a sculpting class, the uniformity of a mesh and how that works. But know it tiles all the way down to the things that I showed you in the last videos. Everything tiles down to the very fundamentals. Alright, so I just wanted to show you that, and let's move on.